The god of war is tired of serving a coward. Ares, god of war, stood before his father, Zeus, his face twisted in anger. For the first time in recorded history, a god dared to question the king of Olympus. Why did Zeus allow the humans to suffer? Wasn't it the god's duty to look after their worshippers? Obviously, Zeus wasn't living up to his responsibilities as supreme leader, and if he couldn't or wouldn't do what was right, then Ares would do it himself. He would take over Olympus and rule the cosmos so much better than his father ever had. But to do this, he needed an army. In today's episode, we will explore when war turns against the gods, when Ares rises against his own father, Zeus, and challenges him for the throne of Olympus. Stay until the end to find out how the god of war took on the king of the gods. But before we start, remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to leave a like. Mount Olympus shook with Ares' rage. The young god's eyes burned with divine fire, sending shivers down the spines of even the bravest Olympians. They watched in silence as Ares confronted his father, the king of the gods, and challenged him for failing to protect mortals from suffering. He vowed to lead the gods to victory in battle against the Titans, to show them all that he was more than capable of ruling the cosmos. Zeus looked back at his son, his expression unreadable. He knew that Ares was right, but he also knew that there were greater things at stake here. If he agreed to go to war with the Titans, then he would be betraying the very foundation of the universe. The ancient truce between the gods and the Titans was sacred. It was the reason why the world had known so much peace for so many years. But Zeus was also afraid of what people would say if he didn't stand up for his son. So instead, he tried to ignore him. But Ares wouldn't have it. He continued to berate his father, calling him a coward, and demanded that he'd stand down and let Ares take his place. As the two argued, the other gods looked on nervously. They knew that whatever happened next could affect the fate of the entire universe. Then suddenly, without warning, Ares attacked. He threw himself at his father, his eyes blazing with fury. Zeus was taken aback by his son's sudden attack, but he quickly recovered and sent a bolt of lightning crashing into Ares, knocking him off his feet. "How dare you defy me, boy?" Zeus roared. "I am your father and the king of the gods. You will not challenge me without consequence." Ares struggled to get back on his feet, his body aching from his father's attack, but he refused to back down. He stood his ground and glared defiantly at Zeus. "You are weak and afraid, father." Ares spat. "You hide behind your precious laws and refuse to fight for what is right. I may be young, but I am stronger and more courageous than you ever were." Zeus's eyes flashed with anger, and he raised his hand to strike his son again. But this time, he hesitated. He knew that if he struck Ares down, he would be disgraced forever. His son might be powerful, but he was still a god. To kill Ares would be a terrible sin. But while Zeus hesitated, Ares struck. He lunged forward and knocked the lightning bolt out of his father's hand. Then he charged at Zeus, swinging his sword with all his might. Zeus stumbled back, trying to avoid Ares' attacks, but the young god was relentless, and soon he had Zeus on the defensive. Ares' blade was fast and deadly, and Zeus could only block so many attacks before growing weary. With each passing moment, Ares grew more confident and his attacks became more aggressive. Soon he had Zeus pinned down and was raining blows upon him. The king of the gods was in trouble. He tried to call out for help, but no one answered. The other gods were too afraid to intervene. They had never seen Ares fight like this before, and they knew that if they got involved, they would only make things worse. Zeus was on his own. Then, suddenly, just as Ares was about to deliver the final blow, a voice boomed across the hall. "Enough." All eyes turned to the door where Poseidon stood, his trident raised high. "That's enough, Ares," he said. "You've caused enough trouble for one day. It's time for this to end." Ares hesitated. He knew that he couldn't win a fight against his father and brother at the same time. So he slowly lowered his sword. Poseidon approached his nephew cautiously. "Ares, you have a lot of anger inside you, but you must learn to control it," he said. "Your attacks were powerful, but reckless. You could have hurt someone." Ares looked down at his feet. He knew that his uncle was right. He had let his anger get the best of him, and he had taken things too far, but he still felt that his father was wrong. Zeus stepped forward and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I know you mean well, Ares," he said, "but you must understand that there are some things that even the gods can't control. Sometimes the best thing we can do is to let things happen and learn from them." Ares nodded slowly. He knew that his father was right. He had been holding on to his anger for too long, and it had finally gotten the better of him. But he also knew that he wasn't wrong for feeling that way. And so Ares and Zeus stood together, father and son, as the other gods looked on in admiration. They had witnessed a rare display of emotion between the two most powerful beings in the universe, and they couldn't help but feel a sense of, in that moment, they knew that no matter what happened next, the bond between Ares and Zeus would never be broken. It wasn't long before word spread throughout Olympus of Ares' heroic stand against his father. The other gods talked in hushed tones about the battle, praising Ares for his bravery and strength. Even Zeus had to admit that his son had done well, even though he didn't agree with his motives. Poseidon was particularly proud of Ares and took him aside to give him some advice. "You have a great power within you, Ares," he said, "but you must learn to control it. Your emotions can be a powerful force, but they can also be your greatest weakness. Remember that." Ares nodded, taking his uncle's words to heart. He knew that he had a lot to learn, but he was determined to become the best warrior in the universe. But while Ares was basking in the glow of his newfound respect, Zeus was plotting his next move. He knew that he couldn't let his son's actions go unchecked. He had to make sure that Ares understood the consequences of his actions, and so the king of the gods devised a plan to teach his son a valuable lesson. He called the other gods to a meeting and laid out his plan. At first, they were a little confused, but as Zeus explained his reasoning, they began to nod their heads in approval. Zeus knew that Ares was hot-headed and impulsive, so he decided to challenge his son to a contest of skill and strategy. If Ares could defeat him in battle, then he would let him rule Olympus for a day. But if he lost, then he would have to swear never to challenge his authority again. Ares was eager to accept the challenge, but the other gods tried to talk him out of it. They knew that even if Ares won, he would be disgraced in front of the entire universe. But Ares was determined. He wanted to prove to his father that he was worthy of respect, and he was willing to risk it all to do it. And so, the day of the battle arrived. The entire universe watched as Zeus and Ares faced off in the arena. The air crackled with electricity as the two gods prepared to do battle. Zeus was confident that he would win easily, but he was in for a surprise. Ares was a skilled warrior, and he fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal. For hours, the two gods battled, neither one able to gain the upper hand. Zeus unleashed bolts of lightning and Ares dodged out of the way. He countered with blasts of concussive force that sent Zeus stumbling backwards. But as the battle raged on, Ares began to tire. He was a young god, powerful, yes, but he lacked the experience and wisdom of his father. Zeus took advantage of this and slowly began to gain the upper hand. Finally, with a mighty roar, Zeus struck Ares down, knocking him off his feet. The young god lay on the ground, defeated but not broken. He looked up at his father, his eyes filled with admiration and respect. He had lost, but he had learned a valuable lesson. Zeus helped his son to his feet and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have fought well, Ares," he said. "But remember, true strength comes not from brute force, but from wisdom and restraint." Ares nodded, understanding his father's words. He had been so focused on proving himself that he had forgotten the most important lesson of all. And so, the king of the gods kept his promise and allowed Ares to rule Olympus for a day. But as the day wore on, Ares began to understand the weight of his father's responsibility. He realized that being a ruler wasn't just about power and glory, but about making difficult decisions that affected the lives of everyone in the universe. He saw the burden that his father carried and the sacrifices that he had made. By the end of the day, Ares had learned more than he could have ever imagined. He had learned humility, responsibility, and the true meaning of strength. And as he handed the scepter back to his father, he knew that he would never challenge him again. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Ares stood before his father, his head bowed in respect. The battle was over and Ares had learned an important lesson about the balance of power. He knew that he couldn't challenge his father's authority again, but he also knew that he couldn't give up his quest for justice. So Ares turned away from his father and walked towards the setting sun. As he disappeared from view, the other gods whispered amongst themselves. What would Ares do now? Would he continue to fight for the mortals? Or would he return to his old ways? Only time would tell. But as the gods watched the sun set over the horizon, they couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Maybe Ares had learned his lesson, but maybe he would find another way to bring balance to the universe. And maybe that was what the God of War was destined to do. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, so you never miss an episode. Also, leave a like if you enjoyed today's episode. We'll see you next time.